Enough Out of You. I'm your host, Bill Rader. And joining me for this week's podcast, as he does each and every week on That's Enough Out of You, is my partner and your good friend, Sean Kane. Sean, what's going on, bud?
Billy Raids, how you doing, buddy?
Doing big show today. You're my good friend too. I don't didn't mean to, imply anything.
Buddy, I know what you meant. It's all good. It's all good. We got a big guest today, pal.
Yeah, a returning guest, one of our favorites. He really is, and he's a crowd favorite too. We get, I can't tell you how many comments and emails we get, Sean. I mean, better than I do.
Great.
How many requests we get to have him back on. But Don McGovern makes his triumphant return to the podcast.
It's been a little while.
It has been Don. Don's had some things going on, but he was able to get back with us this week, and boy, this was a great show. He was in rare form and did a great job.
It really was, Bill, and it's so important because, of course, Don, author of the book Murder Orthodoxies, he's the expert on Marilyn Monroe. I mean, he is the best source on everything Marilyn Monroe. And the thing is, no person in history, Bill, has been attacked more after their death, character assassinated, I think, more than Marilyn Monroe, even more so than the Kennedys. It's really incredible what's been done to her reputation. And today we're going to talk about the source of a lot of that, C.David Heymann. And he was a guy who was like kind of this National Enquirer type reporter who made up these phony interviews that he had with people where he basically said whatever he wanted to say about Marilyn Monroe, about the Kennedys. And Don goes through all that. And it's so important, Bill, because so many reputable news sources picked up on the Heymann interviews and just, they accepted it as fact without doing their own homework, Bill. And that's the frustrating thing. And it's so hard to debunk now when we're all these years later and people are accepting this as fact.
Right. And also some not so reputable news sources like Megyn Kelly. And
we're going to talk about her too.
Oh, awful.
And you saw that interview, Bill, with her and Maureen Callghan. It was just terrible. No,
it was disgusting.
Disgusting.
Yeah.
I mean, go ahead.
They make it sound like it's, just a matter of fact that she was, all that stuff with the birthday song and they, she just made it sound, everybody knows that she just had sex with Bobby, and then then she walked on stage and she was trying to seduce.
That's unbelievable.
And that's the whole reason why Jackie wasn't there. It's all a bunch of bullshit.
Jackie was never going to be there. It was already planned that she wasn't going to be there. But the thing is, Bill, and this is, and you hit on it perfectly, because one of the main problems, and it even happens in the JFK research community, where good researchers, you'll see them say something like, well, we know Marilyn had an affair with John F. Kennedy, and they don't, and then they just go on. And it's like, that's so irresponsible to me, because no, we don't know. What are you quoting? Are you quoting the Heymann interviews? Are you quoting somebody from that interview that never really happened? I mean, they don't source anything, Bill, and then if you're going to use something like that awful book Double Cross that we debunked, that's a novel, that's complete fiction.
Right.
I mean, it's ridiculous, Bill. And this is where it comes down to responsible journalism. And I think Don really, he takes it apart. He's in a lot of ways, he reminds me of John Armstrong with how detailed Don is.
Yeah, absolutely.
The two of those guys are very similar in research, and they're just very, very detailed, Bill.
Yeah.
Very detailed. And this thing is most of it's easy to debunk, Bill, once you get the information, once you do a little work.
Right. And they're also similar in that they're a little bit technology challenged, Sean, which is
that's all right. That's all right.
They're a little bit older guys, so
we don't have video for Don. We didn't have video for John, but that's fine. We got him on the phone. Yep. And just to get the genius of those two guys on the phone is worth it, because both of them they're great journalists and great researchers.
Yep. So, all right, Sean. Anything else before we send it to the show?
No, let's get into it, buddy.
All right. So we'll go. We'll get some time in with one of our sponsors, and then when we come back, we'll be here with Don McGovern.
Sometimes even good people can make a mistake. And when it happens, it's one of the most intense and emotional experiences of your life. It could be a DUI, or maybe you were in the wrong place with the wrong people at the wrong time. Or perhaps you just did something stupid at the spur of the moment without even thinking, and now you're in trouble with the law. Well, you need experienced legal help right away so you don't become a victim of the criminal justice system. Even good people can make a mistake, and if you, a friend, or a loved one has been accused of a crime, don't make another mistake by hiring the wrong attorney for the kind of help you need. You need to visit toddjohnslaw.com. That's toddjohnslaw.com, and then call Attorney Todd Johns today. Attorney Todd Johns has decades of experience helping good people like you who have made mistakes or bad decisions and will stand by you every step of the way. toddjohnslaw.com.
Hey, Sean, we have a returning guest making his triumphant return to That's Enough Out of You, and that is Mr. Don McGovern. Don, welcome back. It's been a while.
Yeah, it has been a while. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you back, Don. We were thinking about you, buddy, and we missed you. You're one of our most popular guests, and one of Bill and my favorites.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
So today, what we want to get into, Don, we want to talk a lot about. We want to really do a deep dive on C.David Heymann, and because so much of the disinformation and the lies that are out there on Marilyn Monroe and the Kennedy brothers and all that stuff, a lot of it, the genesis of it could be traced back to David Heymann and these phony interviews that he did, and people ran with them, and that created such a problem because so many people attribute a lot of stuff to people like Peter Lawford, and realistically, it's this phony interview that Heymann said he had with him. And then, the guy uses deceased persons for a lot of his sources. He doesn't reveal sources. He creates or just make up people as a source. I mean, so it's really, really bad what he did. And then I do also want to get into a little bit on Megyn Kelly, because she's another despicable person that spread a lot of lies about Marilyn Monroe. So we'll talk about her later, but let's start on David Heymann. Give us a little background on this guy, Don.
He was born in January of 1945 to a upper-class German Jewish family. His given name was Clemens Claude Oscar Heymann. C.David Heymann is an assumed name.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not really sure why he assumed that name. Originally, he was going to follow his family into a world of real estate, hotel management, and ownership. So he got a bachelor's degree in hotel administration from Cornell, but he really still at that time wanted to really be a writer.
Right.
He graduated from Cornell in '66 and enrolled at University of Massachusetts Amherst campus to get a degree in writing, study creative writing. He graduated from Massachusetts in '69, and he published a volume of poetry, The Quiet Hours, which I have not been able to find a copy of that. I really wanted to, but I have not been able to. And while he was studying for a doctorate in English literature at Stony Brook, he started reading the works of Ezra Pound.
Right.
That led into his.
No, go ahead. No, I was just going to say Ezra Pound, the fascist, poet, Nazi sympathizer that, James Angleton looked up to. We talk a lot about James Angleton on this show.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, he looked up.
Yeah, he was a Nazi sympathizer. He was basically a fascist. And Heymann published Ezra Pound, The Last Rower, a political profile in 1976. That was his first biography. And it was met with a little bit of success. and compliments and so forth. But then problems developed with people claiming he was a plagiarist. He made this up. He made that up. And that was something that haunted Heymann throughout his whole career.
Right.
That he just basically made things up. And the more you dig into him and the more you research him, the more you realize what a scoundrel he was. And basically, for lack of a better way of saying it, he was just a liar.
Right.
He just lied. That's all there is to it.
No, Don, some of his early failures also led Heymann to attempt suicide with Scotch and Valium, correct?
Right. He wrote a book called Poor Little Rich Girl about Barbara Hutton, published that in 1983, and it was met with much derision, called basically fiction. And as a result, he attempted to kill himself with Valium and Scotch. He wasn't successful. Eventually, he rewrote the book, corrected it, and sold it to a production company that turned it into a TV miniseries. How do you like that?
Wow. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
So let's get into when he starts really getting into Marilyn and the Kennedys. Now, the first time he mentions them is really about what, 5 years after Peter Lawford died, correct?
Right. Lawford died in 1984, Christmas Eve, Christmas Eve morning in 84.
Right.
And Heymann published A Woman Named Jackie in 1989. That was his first book involving the Kennedys. And Marilyn makes a strong appearance in that book. And that book is filled with questionable material. It truly is.
Yeah, and another problem, Don, is he's even the last few years of Peter Lawford's life, he was in really bad health. So the timing of when Heymann could have even had an interview with him is really skeptical.
Well, Donna Morell, I have to give Donna credit because she provided me with a whole lot of information pertaining to Heymann's practices. She tried to find this alleged interview that Heymann had with Peter Lawford.
Right.
Which it would have happened before, Lawford died, obviously. So
obviously,
it would have happened 5 years before Heymann published a woman named Jackie.
Right.
She could not find a tape of the interview, even though Heymann stated on more than one occasion he taped the interview with Lawford. She found a transcript, a copy of which she sent me, and it's 6 handwritten pages. Okay? It's just notes. And words are crossed through, words are changed. And you have to ask yourself, what are the words that Lawford actually spoke? There's not one question in this interview. Lawford did not respond to any questions put forth by Heymann.
Wow.
And so there's no way I can think that what passes or what he wanted people to think was an interview with Peter Lawford was actually an interview.
And what are the other problems? No, go ahead, Don. I'm sorry.
Well, what I was going to say is just 6 handwritten notes, pages of notes.
Right.
It's funny, but Lois Banner found this transcript when she went to Stony Brook to look at Heymann's archives. And she called Heymann and asked Heymann to let her listen to the tape, and Heymann refused to do it.
Wow.
In fact, he has never let anybody listen to any of the alleged tapes of his interviews. I think Donna was able to get a hold of some when she was, when she was at Stony Brook. And she had told me that most of those tapes are not really interviews, they're just conversations.
Wow.
But Lois Banner came to the conclusion that Lawford never really did sit for an interview with Heymann. But even so, Banner used information from Heymann in her book.
Sure. And Don, one of the things I heard is that Heymann or Peter Lawford didn't do many interviews. And one of the things is, I forget who said this, but somebody said that he was so loyal to the Kennedy brothers that even if any of this stuff is true, that he would never say that to somebody else because he was too loyal to the brothers.
Well, Randy Torborelli interviewed Lawford for his book about, I forget what he was writing about.
Right.
It may have been J. Edgar Hoover, but at any rate, Dean Martin told him that Lawford would never have said those things.
Dean Martin, right.
About Marilyn and the Kennedys, particularly if they were true.
Right.
And Torborelli said he considered Lawford to be a very loyal person and people trusted him, and he would never tell things like that about other people.
In Tabarelli, right, he said that the relationship between RFK and Marilyn Monroe was purely platonic, right?
Correct.
Right.
He couldn't find any information. He couldn't find any evidence to support that there was an affair between Marilyn and Robert Kennedy. No. I haven't been able to find any either.
But the problem is, Don, is that, Heymann said so many bad things that Lawford supposedly said, and then people run with it and they attribute that to Lawford, and it really, it's to this phony interview. So tell us some of the really, terrible things that Lawford supposedly said that Heymann said that Lawford said. Let's put it that way.
Well, basically, Heymann uses Lawford as proof or source for all of the information about the relationships between John Kennedy and Robert Kennedy. I mean, that's where it all comes from, is this alleged interview. You want a specific example?
Yeah. Yeah, give us one, Don.
Let me see. Let me find a good one here. Well, I mean, okay, a good example is the events of August the 4th, when supposedly Peter Lawford and Robert Kennedy visited Marilyn twice.
Right.
Once in the afternoon and once at night. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The first book that this appeared in was the book about Jackie Kennedy. Okay. And he said that Marilyn and Robert Kennedy got into a terrible argument. Marilyn got extremely mad and grabbed the kitchen knife and tried to stab Robert Kennedy. And Robert Kennedy and Lawford wrestled her to the ground and disarmed her. Okay.
Right.
And after that, they left. But in the last book that he wrote, which was about Marilyn and
DiMaggio?
DiMaggio.
Yeah. Yeah. Joe and Marilyn, Legends in Love, right?
Right.
In that book, he claimed that the knife became a half-filled glass of champagne. That Marilyn threw a half-filled glass of champagne at Bobby Kennedy, but it hit Peter Lawford instead. So when did that When did those events change?
Right.
So Heymann claimed that Lawford changed his story. Okay?
Right.
Well, Joe and Marilyn's Legends in Love was published in 2014, and Peter Lawford had been dead for 30 years.
So he changed it after he died.
Changed it 30 years after he died. That's fantastic.
Yeah, he changed it. He changed it post-mortem. Yeah.
Right.
Unbelievable. But
Well,
this
he
whole thing
also.
go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you guys go ahead.
Well, I just want to say, but the problem with that whole scenario is that's when we know Robert Kennedy is 350 miles away in Gilroy, California.
Gilroy.
Yeah. So he
Yeah.
could have been
There's
there.
no way it happened. There's no way it happened. But that's an example of the way Heymann just changed things from book to book.
But
And
he
you
also
have to ask
didn't,
yourself, did he read or did he forget what he wrote in A Woman Named Jackie when he was writing about Joe and Marilyn? Did he just forget what he had written?
didn't he also change the location of the initial alleged sexual encounter between JFK and Marilyn Monroe?
Yeah. Let me get to that. Let's see. In A Woman Named Jackie, he asserted Jack and Marilyn. Here's what he wrote. Jack and Marilyn met at Peter Lawford's home in 1957, but saw little of each other until 1959, when JFK arranged to spend several uninterrupted days in Palm Springs with Marilyn. It was there that their affair began. That was in A Woman Named Jackie, page 233.
Right.
Now, Heymann did not provide any calendar dates or any of the calendar dates for those several uninterrupted days in 1959 when they were commencing their affair. So there was no way to check any of this. Okay?
Right.
He didn't say where it happened,
Okay.
just that it was in Palm Springs.
Okay.
So we don't know if they met on the beach, if they met in a car's back seat, they met in a hotel or anything like that, right?
Right.
So in RFK, A Candid Biography, which was published, I think, eight or 9 years after A Woman Named Jackie, he wrote the following. Since their initial walk on Peter Lawford's private stretch of California beach in 1957, in their initial episode of sex in Frank Sinatra's California home in 59, Jack and Marilyn had connected a number of times on both West Coast and East. Once again, we have no calendar dates. We have nothing really to help us substantiate this, right?
Right.
But there's a problem with it.
Yeah.
In 1940, Sinatra built the house he was living in,
Right.
and he in 1954 he leased the house to a couple from Texas because he moved into a larger compound in Rancho Mirage.
Right.
So obviously Marilyn and Jack Kennedy or John Kennedy did not have an initial sexual encounter in a house owned by Sinatra in Palm Springs in because he wasn't living there, right?
Oh, right.
So it just couldn't have happened.
And the last I checked, Don, you could only have one initial encounter.
That's right. You can't have an initial encounter twice. But then in Joe and Marilyn Legend, pardon me?
Well, the way he changes things, who knows, you know?
Well, you don't know, but he changed it again. In Joe and Marilyn Legends in Love, here's what he wrote. Nothing happened at the first meeting between Kennedy and Monroe. They, meaning John and Marilyn, met and took a long walk along the beach. They met again in 1959, this time for what amounted to a furtive 60-minute tryst in the Kennedy leased penthouse atop the Hotel Carlisle in New York. So in all of those years, once again, he changed it to their initial sexual encounter to the Carlisle Hotel in New York.
Wow. Unbelievable.
So
Yeah, it's amazing.
he misquoted himself. That's all. He like Charles Barkley. He just misquoted himself. The shame of this stuff, Don, is that intelligent people who are interested in Kennedy and in Maryland will read this stuff and believe it, and that's what their impressions are of these two people. Instead, they're just reading a pack of lies. It's unbelievable how you could get away with that stuff. It's just incredible.
Well, he also maintains that Marilyn and John Kennedy were together in 1960 at the Democratic National Convention.
Right.
When we know it's not true, because Marilyn was in Manhattan. She wasn't with John Kennedy.
Right.
But I mean, that other lover he supposedly shared with the mobster said she was with John Kennedy during the convention.
Right. Judith Exner, which
Judith Exner, right?
She's another one. We had Jim on to talk about her, Don, and Judith told 4 different stories, and they all contradicted themselves. Like every story is different. It's unbelievable. She's another one. She's pathetic. But it's the problem is, Don, is Simon and Schuster, published these books of Heymann's. I mean, that's the problem. I mean,
yeah, when they've been called. Pardon me, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, go ahead. I just said that's the problem, that this stuff is out there.
Well, yeah, and when Simon and Schuster have been confronted about Heymann's dishonesty in his, literary practices, they don't want to talk about it.
No.
They basically accept it because Heymann's books always sold and made a lot of money.
Right.
That's simple.
I mean, I could write a book about JFK and Maryland being abducted by aliens, and spending
There have been books.
spending 50 years in space and then being returned to Earth, 5 minutes into the future. And I could write a series of books on that, and they would sell like crazy because it's Maryland and John. I mean, that's the truth.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's surprising that book hasn't been written.
Well,
they do bring in UFOs into the story, though, Don.
They do that. You knew that was bound to happen, right?
In Area 51 and everything else, the mob, and it's just incredible. It really is.
We will be right back. DK's Corner has moved. Come see us in our brand new location at 201 Cherry Street in Jessup, Pennsylvania, right across from the Jessup Plaza. Enjoy a brand new menu with hot and cold sandwiches, soups, salads, pizza, delicious breakfast, including breakfast bowls and sandwiches, specialty coffees, and DK's famous Razzle Dazzle flavor shaken espressos, and still the best cheesesteaks around. Follow DK's Corner on Facebook and Instagram, or call them at 570-209-0278 to find out about their daily specials and catering. And DK's Corner now has beautiful outdoor seating for the summer. Don't feel like leaving the house? Call DK's Corner for delivery. And we thank DK's Corner for sponsoring That's Enough Out of You. DK's Corner, now in Jessup, Pennsylvania.
He talks about Marilyn's autopsy.
Right.
And he says that an autopsy conducted later that day, he must be talking about August the 5th, by Deputy Medical Examiner Dr. Thomas Noguchi.
Noguchi, right.
Found copious amounts of a wide array of barbiturates in Marilyn's blood and liver. An examination of her stomach contents revealed a number of not fully dissolved Nembutal capsules, but no evidence of second-haul. Then he wrote in Joe and Marilyn's Legends in Love, surprisingly, is what he wrote, surprisingly, he, meaning Noguchi, found no trace of barbiturates in Marilyn's stomach lining or digestive tract, a total contradiction to what he had written in the book about Robert Kennedy. But it's clear if you read Marilyn's autopsy, which is a public record, he could have gotten a copy of it.
Right.
He did not find any undissolved or undigested capsules in Marilyn's stomach. He didn't find a wide array of barbiturates in her blood and liver. He didn't. Those are just false statements. So why would he write such stuff? It's incredible.
But Don, not only that, like it wasn't just the Gucci, but it was also pathologist Cyril Wecht, who's very well respected, just passed away recently, and Boyd Stevens. Both of them said that Marilyn was not murdered. Correct?
Yeah. Yes, and a pharmacologist by the name of Dr. Nicholas Cozy basically said the same thing after he performed experiments
Right.
to try to determine exactly what happened as best he could, let's say. But it's clear that Marilyn swallowed the capsules that killed her. That's clear as spring water.
Now, Don, when we had Jim DiGenio on, he was talking about how, you know, he felt that there should have been a look into the doctors. It's kind of similar to what happened with Michael Jackson, that the doctors were giving her, too many pills, and that should have been looked at. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree that if what happened to Marilyn happened today, those two doctors would have been brought up on charges.
Right.
Yeah, they would have either been negligent, overprescribing, or even maybe manslaughter.
Yeah.
Because they were just writing her prescriptions for too many pills.
The problem is, Don, is that we talk to so many people, and it's hard for a lot of people to get past that Marilyn Monroe was murdered. And even especially like Marilyn fans, they don't want to believe that she committed suicide. So they talk about this, that either it was the mob, it was the CIA, it was the Kennedy brothers. I mean, all the theories, contradict one another, but yet it's hard for people to get past that. I mean, I talk to so many people, and you show them the facts, and you tell them about the pathologists and everything, but they just don't want. They just want to believe what they want to believe.
Well, they don't want to believe that somebody like Marilyn, who they think had it all, even though she was a troubled woman, they don't want to think that she would take her own life. For some reason, it's easier for them to think she was murdered
Right.
by the despicable Kennedys,
Right.
And they had nothing to do with it.
No, but she did try to commit suicide before this. Several times, right?
She tried 4 times. Yeah.
4 times.
That we know of. She attempted suicide 4 times. But here's another good example of what Heymann did in his books. In RFK, a candid biography of Robert Kennedy, he said that after they wrestled the knife away from Marilyn, he wrote, "Bobby thought we ought to call Dr. Greenson, tell him to come over. The psychiatrist arrived at Marilyn's home within the hour." That appears on page 322. Now, that suggests to me that they called Greenson from Marilyn's house. They're in Brentwood.
Right.
And they waited for Dr. Greenson to arrive. Does that not seem
That's the way
plausible?
I would read it. Yeah.
That's how you would read.
Sure.
Okay. In a later book, I think this is in Joe and Marilyn Legends in Love. Yeah, Legends in Love, page 349. After we drove off, after they basically, after Marilyn had tossed the champagne on Lawford, and Marilyn wouldn't give Bobby Kennedy her diary, right?
Right.
Bobby walked out and got in the car, and Lawford followed him. And then this is Lawford talking to Heymann. After we drove off, RFK suggested that we contact Marilyn's psychiatrist. Maybe he could help her. So I pulled into a service station and called Dr. Greenson from a public phone booth. I described the scene that had just taken place. Greenson thanked me and said he'd drive over to see Marilyn.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Complete,
Don, isn't there another story?
Contradiction.
Isn't there another story where Greenson's in the car with them and they're speeding with the lights off?
Well, yeah, that's after she's been, that's after she's been murdered.
Okay. Wow.
But don't you find it kind of funny that Lawford referred to his brother-in-law Bobby as RFK?
Yeah.
I do. I find that extremely odd.
Yeah.
Sounds like somebody else had written this.
Sure, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, somebody else had written it. But those are prime examples of the type of contradictions that you find from book to book. These books written by Clem Heymann, and that's just the tip of the iceberg.
Now, does Heymann go into the alleged Maryland diary that supposedly all these people see, but nobody has it?
Yeah, he talks about the diary, and he's got several stories about it, all of which contradict each other.
Of course.
He's just like anybody else as far as that diary is concerned. He's just making it up.
Yeah.
Because it never existed.
Well, it's amazing, Don, because I have so many people tell me, well, this was said in Marilyn's diary, and it's like, where is this diary? Like, is there just some person walking around, running around, going up to people and showing them and then taking off? Like, nobody asked the question of where the diary is now, or who physically had it, where it physically is now. They don't ask the question. They just run with whatever's said, and it's ridiculous, all the stuff that's made up and that's attributed to this phony diary that never existed.
Well, the thing I like to point out to people is that the diary didn't exist until Robert Schweitzer created it.
Right.
The diary didn't exist in 1962 when Marilyn died.
Right.
It was not until Robert Schweitzer created the prop to give his Marilyn was murdered theory a motive for murdering her, this diary,
right,
that it came into being.
Sure.
Yeah, for 12 years, nobody knew to hunt for this diary.
And Don, we know Marilyn had journals, and the journals resemble nothing of the supposed diary, whether the way she speaks in the journals compared to the diary, or the way she uses says things out of order and then uses arrows in the journal. She doesn't do that in the diary. So there's so many discrepancies between what we know is her journal that we know she wrote those compared to the diary.
Yeah, if you compare what people like Schweitzer and Rothmiller and the Lionel Grandison Sr. said was in that diary, if you compare those words to Marilyn's actual writings, you see a vast difference. And there's nothing in Marilyn's journals about making love to John Kennedy and Lawford's swimming pool and all of that stuff like those guys reported was in there. It's all made up.
No, Heymann got on, he was on Hardball with Chris Matthews, correct?
Yes, he was on Hardball with Chris Matthews talking about the JFK Jr. tragedy.
Let's get into JFK Jr. So he supposedly had this friendship with JFK Jr. This 10-year friendship?
That's what he claimed. He had a 10-year friendship with John Kennedy Jr., even though he never mentioned it before, 1999.
Right.
It began with an article Let's see. He gave an interview to a reporter, trying to find her name, Cindy Adams. She published a story in the New York Post in which Heyman's claim.
She's a gossip columnist, right? Cindy
Right.
Adams? Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Gossip columnist Cindy Adams.
Right.
Yeah.
Not exactly a, hardcore news reporter.
He claimed, or he told Cindy Adams, that JFK Jr. really did not want to fly the airplane and go to Martha's Vineyard because he wasn't a very experienced pilot. And that's where all of that stuff started. It all started with Clem Heymann.
Unbelievable.
And that's how she got blamed. That's how Carolyn Bessette actually got blamed for causing the accident, because JFK Jr. didn't really want to go, but she made him do it.
Unbelievable.
But the most interesting thing about it to me is once it was found out, basically, that all of this was made up, and there's a lot of evidence that makes that clear, right?
Sure.
Cindy Adams said the following: I don't care one way or another about Heyman's reputation. And she's talking about Heyman's reputation for lying, except as it concerns me. And she's not the only writer / reporter, whatever, who has said that. I don't care what Heyman's reputation is. And that's the problem, isn't it? They don't care.
Right.
That's the problem. Exactly.
That's what makes her a gossip columnist and not a reporter. Because the reporter checks their sources and makes sure that they're reliable and that they're telling the truth.
Although the other problem is, reporters are running with this thing too. They're attributing stuff to like Peter Lawford that came from Heymann interviews. Like, Don, we don't know how many stuff, was attributed to different people. And it was actually the reporters are getting it from these Heymann phony interviews.
Well, the funny thing about the Lawford interview, all right, an important fact about the Lawford interview, many pages of quotations in Heyman's books are attributed to Peter Lawford, right?
Right.
There aren't that many words in this alleged transcription. You see what I'm getting at?
Yeah,
I mean,
it's a problem. Yeah. It's unbelievable. Yeah.
We're talking. Well, here, let me read this to you. Let me read this to you. The entire transcript contains 597 total words. One lengthy Lawford quotation that spans 2 pages in A Woman Named Jackie contains more words than the transcript, 626 words. And that's just one quotation. And not one topic or thought or idea presented in those 626 words can be found in the 597 words on the 6 handwritten pages that Lois Banner evidently accepted as a transcript of C.David Heymann's interview with Peter Lawford. In other words, it's just ridiculous that people would accept something like that as a transcript. But they don't explain what it is. They don't tell the readers what this transcript actually is. Mm-hmm. I've seen it. I couldn't publish it on my website for copyright, because of copyright laws.
Right, sure.
But it's obviously not a transcript of an interview. So the sum and total of it really is that Heymann just invented all of these words that he attributed to Peter Lawford.
Unbelievable.
Just like he invented words he attributed to Ralph Roberts.
Right.
And Donna Morell told me that she tried to find something in Heyman's archive there at Stony Brook involving an interview with Ralph Roberts. She couldn't find anything. There's nothing in that archive to indicate that Heymann ever interviewed Ralph Roberts.
Wow.
And Heymann uses Ralph Roberts for a lot of things, like the telephone call to Jackie,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of salacious information about Marilyn and DiMaggio. You know, Heymann even claimed DiMaggio carried around a life-size doll of Marilyn that folded up into a case.
Wow. That's
I kid you not.
I believe it. I believe it, Don. But it's, you know, the problem. Go ahead.
I'm just going to say, when people read that, how can they not realize that that's bull?
Exactly.
How can a mannequin fold up into a leather case? Did he carry around a wardrobe of Marilyn's? A bunch of nightgowns of hers? I don't know. It's ridiculous, really.
You know, one of the main problems, though, Don, is like when a reporter says something and says that Peter Lawford said this about Marilyn and the Kennedys, and he's quoting a quote from Heyman's interviews, but he's not telling the people that. He's saying it's from Peter Lawford. That carries weight with people because a lot of people know how close Lawford was with the Kennedy brothers, and you know, and it just causes so much. It muddies the water so bad, and this is the problem that we're dealing with.
Yeah, it's really hard to fight it. It's really hard to fight it because Heymann wrote many books, and he's used by many other authors. He's quoted by many other authors.
Unbelievable. Because Summers uses him, right?
Summers uses him in later books, later editions of Goddess, because Heymann really didn't start writing about the Kennedys and Marilyn until after Goddess had been published.
True, right. How about Mark Shaw? Does he use him? Does Mark Shaw use him?
Mark Shaw doesn't. I don't know that he really, I don't recall him actually referencing Heymann, but he often repeats what Heymann has said, okay? Without giving Heymann credit, I guess is what you could say. The interesting person that I had the opportunity to talk to, thanks to Donna Morell, or I didn't talk to her, but the information, I should say, that Donna gave me that she talked to her was Jerry Visco, who was Heyman's girlfriend at the time,
right,
of the JFK Jr. death.
Mm-hmm.
He claimed they went on a double date. He told, I forget who it was now, but he told a reporter, maybe Andrew Goldman, that and Jerry Visco went on a double date with JFK Jr. and his wife.
Mm-hmm.
They had drinks at a club, and then they went to and had a dinner at a restaurant, right?
Right.
The evening together began at Madison Pub and then transferred to the Right Bank Cafe on Madison Avenue. Many people that are associated with these businesses have contradicted this, said this, as far as they know, never happened.
Right.
JFK Jr. and Carolyn Bessette were never in those places.
Right.
But the interesting thing is that he was paid, meaning Heymann, was paid $10,000 to write an article about this evening. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And the articles that he wrote are maybe a year or two apart. And they're totally different. He describes the same event, but what he describes happen are totally different. How can that be?
Unbelievable.
And originally, Jerry Visco corroborated that they went out on a double date with JFK Jr. and
Right.
Carolyn Bessette.
And then she
And
changed her
then
mind.
Donna Morell talked to her, and she told her, she meaning Jerry told Donna, that Heymann made it all up.
Did she say that she was afraid of Heymann, that he was
She said she was afraid of Heymann because he had abused her in the past. Yeah.
wow. Unbelievable.
Let's see. On July the 19th, 1999, Kathy Griffin agreed to pay Heymann $10,000 for a exclusive interview regarding JFK Jr. for publication in the New Idea magazine. I think that's an Australian magazine. This was before they even found the aircraft wreckage and the bodies. Okay.
Right.
Virtually 3 years later, Heymann also wrote an article about JFK Jr. that appeared in Mail on Sunday, which is a tabloid, on February the 3rd of 2002. The remarkable fact about these two articles is this. Both essentially describe the same event, the double date with JFK Jr. and his wife Carolyn. Remarkably, each article is diametrically different. Okay. In the New Idea article, he was very complimentary of Carolyn Bessette.
Right.
Called her gregarious and charming, and he was captivated by her, etc. Then he wrote about her. He said, but it was Carolyn who had the style of his mother and the control, even though I felt there were moments where her talk bordered on the mundane. She was so charming and peppered her stories with such theatrical delivery that they suddenly became interesting as the sort of examination of a modern-day socialite. She and John shared another thing in common, a terrific sense of humor. Now, that was written for the New Idea article. 3 years later, in the Mail on Sunday, he described a totally different Carolyn Bessette. She was in totally different clothes. Here's what he wrote. Carolyn sat stiffly through the 2-hour dinner, constantly fidgeting with her suit jacket and a gold choker necklace. The atmosphere was strained and oppressive. I realized just how precarious their marriage had become. He described her as glum and moody. That she and John obviously didn't get along. John snapped at her at one point in the evening, "You're not going to do anything. You have not done anything since we got married." They were both angry with each other, but her hostility extended to anyone showing any interest in him. She would be dismissive and rude of any way that approached our table. Now, that's a totally different Carolyn
Totally.
than he described in the other article, right?
Yeah, totally.
Amazing. So it's no doubt in my mind, and I'm sure there's no doubt in your mind, that all of this is BS.
Made up. Yeah.
He didn't have any relationship with JFK Jr.
No.
whatsoever. In fact, Jerry Visco said it was made up.
Right. But she was afraid of Heymann, though.
Right. But then in 2007, Heymann wrote the story of John and Caroline Kennedy. Here's what Donna wrote me in an email. In his 2007 American Legacy, the story of John and Caroline Kennedy, Heymann merely mentioned his alleged close friendship with John, the subject of his book. In a brief source note, on page 531, Heymann wrote, from 1990 to 1999, the author both met with and telephoned JFK Jr. on a number of occasions. although his name is not included in the list of interviews, anecdotal information imparted by him has been incorporated into the book. That's all he wrote.
Wow.
He didn't say anything about a long friendship. He didn't say anything about, he claims that JFK Jr. complimented his book about his mother. I just find that difficult to believe. I mean, that book about Jacqueline Kennedy was extremely salacious.
Yeah.
Particularly the updated version that he published
Right.
after Jacqueline died. I mean, there was a commentator that worked for George Magazine that he said he felt like John Kennedy Jr. probably would have hit Heymann in the mouth.
He probably would have.
If he ever met him.
Yeah.
Considering some of the awful things he wrote, not only about his mother, but about his uncle.
Yeah.
Right.
In that book about them having a love affair.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
With no
It's
basis
amazing.
whatsoever.
We will be right back.
That's Enough Out of You is also sponsored by Casa Quattro Winery, featuring over 20 flavors of wine, from dry red, dry white, and fruit for your sampling pleasure. Casa Quattro Winery offers entertainment, parties, and private events. Now serving a full menu with a little something for everyone, including appetizers, salads, dinners, pizza, and desserts. Casa Quattro has some of the best live entertainment in the area, with comedy and karaoke nights and live bands. Check us out on Facebook and Instagram for all of our upcoming events. And if you mention the code OUTA, that's OUTTA, you get 15% off of your order. Located on Main Street in Peckville, Pennsylvania, call 570-382-3855 for more information. And we thank Casa Quattro Winery for their support.
Talk about the slush fund, because that's interesting, because like the Kennedys, they didn't have enough money, right? So they would have to have this slush fund created for them, because they didn't.
Heymann claimed that Marilyn contributed $25,000 to the John Kennedy's campaign in one book, right? $25,000. And then in the next book, he said Marilyn contributed only $3,000 to the campaign slush fund before she changed her mind and contributed $5,000. Now, a slush fund to me is something that people have that they use for dishonest things.
Exactly. Right.
That they don't want anybody to know about it.
Right.
I just find it hard to believe that the Kennedys would need a slush fund. I mean, they could spend their money on that campaign however they wanted to, right?
Absolutely. No doubt about
Particularly if it's their money.
Yeah.
But anyway, the important detail here is Marilyn was a keeper of just about everything. She kept receipts, canceled checks, you name it, she kept it. None of those checks have ever appeared. The one for $25,000, the one for $3,000, or the one for $5,000. They've never developed or materialized ever.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. A Kennedy slush fund, yeah.
Yeah.
And then he said also that his father, the elder Kennedy, the elder Joe, had already given $3 million of his money to the fund. And we're talking about 1960 here, so $3 million is probably $60 million today.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. Unbelievable.
Heymann is just a scoundrel. He's a scoundrel.
Yeah.
He was a liar.
He's terrible. He's a jackal. We call it jackal.
Right.
Don, let's talk about Joe DiMaggio Jr., because Jr. didn't he didn't conduct a lot of interviews with the media, but Heymann claims that he had an interview with Jr., right?
Exactly. Yeah. In fact, he dedicated Joe and Marilyn Legends in Love to Joe DiMaggio Jr., which I find to be really kind of sickening.
Yeah, really. Yeah.
You know?
I mean, that's
Yeah,
that's
he claimed that Joe Jr. gave him several interviews, I think, that he used in Joe and Marilyn Legends in Love. But according to Donna Morrell, here's what she sent me in an email. Heymann's archives at Stony Brook contain no file, transcript, tape recording, or research documentation of Joe Jr. providing an interview to Heymann. Information from Heymann's archive include documents dated from the fall of 1999, after the death of Joe Jr. Again, no documentation in Heymann's archives exists or even mentions an interview with Joe DiMaggio Jr. Several news accounts published prior to and immediately after Joe Jr.'s death confirmed that Joe Jr. never granted a lengthy, detailed interview to any journalist or reporter, let alone Heymann. I mean, it's just another example of Clem Heymann using a dead source, Joe DiMaggio Jr. There was no way that anybody could corroborate or disprove anything, right?
Sure.
Particularly since Joe Jr. didn't give interviews.
Right. Right. And this is what Heymann's did his whole career.
Right, exactly. But not only that, apparently Joe Jr. had the same disdain and distrust of the media that his father and Marilyn had.
Right.
You know, they both distrusted the media.
Sure.
But Heymann, Heymann has a long quote in his book that he attributed to Joe Jr., where Joe says after busting out of Yale, he attended Yale for a year and then he left. I did the dumbest thing I probably ever done. I moved to San Francisco and married a girl I barely knew. We eloped. It lasted a month. Well, that's just not true.
Wow.
After leaving Yale, Joe Jr. did not elope with a girl from San Francisco. After leaving Yale, DiMaggio married a young woman from San Diego County on May 18th, 1963. Joe Jr.'s marriage did not last a month. It lasted approximately a year. Joe Jr. did not join the Marines following the dissolution of his 1963 marriage. He joined the Marines after leaving Yale.
Wow.
And if you look at the photographs of Joe Jr. with his dad at Marilyn's funeral, he's in his Marines uniform.
Right.
Well, as we've said many times, Don, why let facts get in the way of a good story, right?
Really.
Well, you know, the funny thing about it, if you read, there's no biography about David Heymann or Clem Heymann. There's really, you have to rely on articles that you find or obits or whatever. And every one of them says the same thing, that C.David Heymann did not let the facts get in the way of a good story. That's apparent. That's apparent.
Sure is.
But still,
People quote him.
authors today rely on C.David Heymann
Right.
That's
for
a shame.
source material.
It's really a shame.
That's shocking.
Talk about the source that Heymann made up completely. What was the guy's name? Paul Bear? He made him up completely?
Well, he made up many.
Okay.
Let me run through a list of them.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
According to Donna, and I agree with her, here are the sources or the people that Clem Heymann invented and used in his books use their testimony in his books. Ready?
Yep.
Susan Imhoff, Amy Brandon, Elizabeth Okren, Jade Stewart, Chuck Pick, Susan Sclover, Thurston Gauleiter, Charles Duffy, Paul Bear, Kurt Lamprecht, Jane Duffy, and her husband Mike.
It's about a dozen names you rattled off.
Let me count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Exactly, it does.
Wow.
Maybe more. Maybe more. Susan Sclover, he used twice. She appeared in 2 different books in 2 different functions.
Unbelievable.
It's really pathetic.
Thurston Gauleiter was a person who allegedly overheard the conversation between Caroline and her Uncle Teddy on an airline flight from Paris, coming from Paris to New York on a particular date. Come to find out, that couldn't have happened because Teddy was in Washington, D.C. on those dates. And this was discovered by Donna Morell. And NPR had published an excerpt from the particular book where this conversation supposedly was reported by Heymann. And NPR appended a editorial comment to the excerpt, basically talking about what I just said, that there was no way it could have happened because Teddy Kennedy was in Washington, D.C.
Wow.
And not only that, Donna tried to find a Thurston Gauleiter and could not prove that he ever existed. Okay? And NPR did the same thing. They tried to locate a Thurston Gauleiter, and they couldn't find any evidence that he ever existed. He was just made up by Clem Heymann.
Unbelievable. Let me ask you this, Don. What responsibility does CBS share in this entire mess?
Well, I think they share a lot. I mean, that's my opinion.
Right.
I'm sure they don't care what I think, but obviously they have promoted the man's work.
Right.
And they continue to publish it, even publishing Joe and Marilyn Legends in Love. But an important thing I want to talk about before we end is that he didn't finish that book.
Right, right.
That book was incomplete when he died. Wasn't published for 2 years.
Right, correct.
So there was 2 years of work that somebody had to do. Excuse me. And I believe, I'm pretty confident that it was finished by his wife, Beatrice Schwartz, and another woman. Oh, here's something I want to include.
Okay.
David K. Johnston, of course, has always been a critic of Heymann's.
Mm-hmm.
He pointed out in his Newsweek article, here's what he wrote. A handwriting expert said Heymann's handwritten notes of the purported Lawford interview bore a striking resemblance to the writing in Heymann's purported Hutton notebooks. You know, he did the same thing with Barbara Hutton. Said he got her notebooks and used them, etc.
Right.
But come to find out, they were basically something that he had written. So he was what would you say, consistent at least? He was consistently dishonest.
Consistently dishonest, yes. It's a good way to put it.
Yeah, his tactics never changed
No,
to the point of
No.
finding obits of people that he could use in his books, finding that they were, they died so he could use them as sources.
right.
Right.
And his wife confirmed that, right?
I don't know if it was his wife. Many people, I think Jim DiEugenio said it was his wife.
Yeah, I think Jim told us that. Yeah,
Yeah.
but it was
Well,
people
I
who
don't doubt
worked
it.
for him, right?
Pardon me?
Was it? But we know that people that worked for him confirmed that, right?
Well, I think the people that worked for him did whatever he told them to do.
Right. I mean, that's about as bad as it gets doing that.
Well, he's just an awful person.
Terrible.
I mean, that's the only thing you can say about him, even to the point of being a woman beater.
Yeah,
He's a pretty horrible guy.
Yeah.
horrible.
We will be right back.
And we would like to thank our sponsor, Gracious Day Grains. Sean, you like to eat healthy, don't you?
Always, buddy. I try to eat healthy as much as I can.
Yeah. And there is nothing healthier than what they call like farm to table, right? So when you can get something right from the ground and make it and then put it right on your table. And Gracious Day Grains, they have a tremendous selection, and it's totally organic. Everything is, they don't use any sort of herbicides or pesticides or anything like that. They have a bunch of different products on their website, Gracious Day Grains. So if you go to graciousdaymilling.com, you'll find a bunch of great stuff there, Sean.
Yeah, you will, Billy. And it's owned by Tom Maxey, who's a great guy from Virginia. He's a truth seeker, just like me and you, buddy. And Tom's growing philosophy follows the wisdom of farmers of centuries past. And a quote from Tom is, "If we practice the right rotations, we exclude the bugs and weeds without needing herbicides or pesticides." So, this is great, Billy. What he's doing is fantastic.
There's cornbread mix, there's cornmeal, popcorn he sells, buckwheat Sean, have you had buckwheat pancakes?
No, buddy.
Oh they're delicious. I love buckwheat pancakes. And Gracious Day Grains sells buckwheat pancakes. Just go to their website and you'll be able to find all of this stuff there. You can order it right off the website. You can find out all about how they farm and their whole philosophy. Tom's philosophy is great stuff.
It really is, Billy. And one of the things he does is he grinds small batches at very low temperatures, which retains the flavor and the freshness.
Of course. And it can't get any fresher than that. It's literally right from the ground. So again, go to graciousdaymilling.com and just, take a look on there. You can order whatever you want and they'll send it right to your door. Again, it doesn't get any fresher than that, right from Tom's farm to your door to your table. So
absolutely. And eat healthy and you'll feel better.
Absolutely. I wish I could do that. I wish I could eat healthier, Sean.
Well, start with Tom's stuff, buddy.
I'm going to order some of those buckwheat pancakes. I love
There you go. I'm going to try them too, Billy.
Yeah, they're really good. All right. Gracious Day. We thank Gracious Day Grains for their sponsorship.
Thank you.
Yeah, Beatrice Schwartz and a writer by the name of Carla Stockton obviously prepared the manuscript or finished the manuscript of Joe and Marilyn Legends in Love for publication. Carla, let's see, let me refresh my memory here. I think Carla was also a ghostwriter that Heymann had employed in the past.
Okay.
She was Beatrice Schwartz. They met at Cornell. And, 'cause, 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 ' this article written by Carla appeared in, let's see here, some art schools magazine, Columbia University School of the Arts website. Carter was also one of Heymann's researchers and a ghostwriter. Okay.
Right.
But the interesting thing about this is their attitude towards Heymann's lack of honesty. The art school article is a curiosity. Carlos wrote that Heymann made it his business to pry into the lives and loves of the rich and famous, and he had a reputation for skirting fast and loose around the facts. No condemnation of that. He had a nose for the salacious, and he was not shy about embellishing it. So they acknowledge
Right.
that Heymann was a liar.
Wow. Wow. And Don, what was the quote that Heymann said the reason he did a lot of this is because he wanted to prove to people that their heroes
His
were
subjects
flesh and blood
were
humans?
human.
Right.
Were human. Like they were human.
Unreal.
Unbelievable.
Here's what this gal, Carla Stockton, wrote in her article. This is pretty unbelievable, really. And this is supposedly a journalist. Right? The real proof is in the pudding. Reviews are overwhelmingly positive, and of course they refer to David's propensity for hyperbole and fabrication. She's talking about Joe and Marilyn Legends in Love. What intrigues readers the most are the degree of deliciousness David folds into the scandal, the height of the non-sentimentality he weaves into his characters' emotional revelations, and the authenticity he carves out of his very flawed subjects, rendered all the more believable by their inconsistencies. I find that paragraph to be a prime example of what's wrong with today's media.
Yeah.
Sums it up.
They confuse salaciousness and deliciousness with authenticity.
Right.
It's just amazing. Donna sent Carla Stockton an email.
Mm-hmm.
I emailed her about the fabrication in Heymann's books. Stockton told me to never email her again. She slammed the Newsweek cover story. I shared the email with David K. Johnston, and Johnston wrote her directly saying her comments about the Newsweek piece were defamatory. Stockton never responded.
Wow.
Jim suggested that I get in touch with Lisa Peace.
Right.
And talk to her about Emily Bessler. You know, this was Joe and Marilyn's Legend of Love was actually published under the colophon of Emily Bessler books. Let's see. Lisa, a renowned RFK researcher and author, informed me via email that her contact with Emily Bessler happened so long ago that she could not recall very much about the words that they exchanged. Evidently, Emily dismissed, nay, excused her involvement with Clem Heyman's dishonest books by pronouncing that he was the expert, meaning that she merely accepted what Clem wrote based on that assessment of him. Although Lisa disagreed with Emily by noting that Clem was lying,
Right.
Lisa lamented, I made no headway with her at all. So these people don't care.
No.
They just don't care. Finally, and in closing, according to Carla's article, Emily Bessler knew from the start that the book would make it into print. I never doubted it, she affirms. We have done well with David's books. And B was there to usher it all along. She's talking about Heymann's wife. And it's clear the reason that publishers like Simon & Schuster, CBS, whatever name you want to give them,
Right.
publish these books is because they make money.
Make money, exactly.
They make money. Yep.
They're money makers. So Don, let's wrap this up because I know we kept you a long time, but I want to just wrap it up with Megyn Kelly, who's she's awful too. But she's now promoting this new book by Maureen Callghan, Ask Not.
Oh my!
Which is just another.
Oh my
hit
goodness!
Piece. Yeah, it's another hit piece, and Kelly actually says that RFK was in L.A. the day that Marilyn was killed. We know that's a lie. We talked about that, but just talking that a little bit because Jim wrote a great review of this on his website, Kennedy's and King, and he really slammed them pretty good on it.
Yeah, I think I was going to write something when I first came across the book and I first read the sections dedicated to Marilyn.
Right.
But then after I read Jim's, I felt there was really no need for me to write anything.
Yeah,
it's just a terrible book.
Terrible.
She, in her bibliography, she puts a woman named Jackie. I'm not going to say that means that she sourced from Heymann, but I think it's pretty clear that Maureen Callghan has an agenda.
Oh yeah, political agenda.
She has an agenda. She has a political agenda, and to a certain extent, so does Megyn Kelly.
Sure, and Jim talked about that in his review. He talked about basically protected Trump to go after Harris is basically what he was talking about.
Well, I think the main political agenda is to make sure the Kennedys are besmirched no matter what. I mean, I saw an interview with Megyn and Robert Kennedy Jr. Have you seen that interview?
I've seen the bits and pieces of it. I kind of
Robert Kennedy Jr. Yeah, he basically said, I was with my father all day. He wasn't in Los Angeles. And Megyn Kelly basically, the man was there. He was there.
He was there. He was in Gilroy.
She basically contradicted Robert Kennedy Jr. and said, when a man wants to have an affair, he'll find a way.
Jeez. She's something else. She really is. She's something else. But one of the worst things, Don, is that Callghan, talks about this complete lie that said Marilyn had an abortion and the baby was RFK's. And Thomas Noguchi said that there was no signs at all that Marilyn had an abortion.
Well, not only that, her gynecologist, Leon Crone, said Marilyn never had an abortion.
Right.
You know what happened? Marilyn went into the hospital to have a procedure done to try to help cure her. She had severe endometriosis, and that's what made it difficult for her to carry a baby to term.
Right.
And that visit to the hospital has been turned into she went into the hospital for an RFK abortion. That is complete bullshit.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Really, it's just a disgrace. What these people do is a disgrace.
No.
I mean, all of them.
Well, Milo Spiriglio and the woman that co-wrote his last book claimed that Marilyn had her fallopian tubes removed. Well, Thomas Noguchi's autopsy said that Marilyn's fallopian tubes are intact and patent. I mean, obviously something they made up.
Exactly. Exactly. It's really disgraceful.
Yeah.
It really is.
Terrible.
Yeah, there's no way to fight people like Maureen Callghan and Megyn Kelly.
No.
They have such a loud pulpit.
Yeah.
Well,
that there's just no way to fight them. I mean, you can contradict them and you can do the best that you can do, but they have a louder voice.
yeah.
I mean,
True.
I've watched several interviews with Callghan and her talking about how the Kennedys abused and this woman and that woman and Exner and the intern who said she had an affair with Kennedy when she was 16 or however old she was.
Yeah.
I've read part of her book. I had to put it down, you know.
Yeah. Disgusting. It's really disgusting.
Yeah.
Well, we do our best in our little corner of the world here, Don, to try to combat
Oh no,
some of this
I
stuff.
think y'all do great. Yeah.
Well, we couldn't do it
But,
without you. We couldn't do it without you, Don, especially, all the research that you've done. Honestly, the book that you've written and the research that you've done, the articles you've written just really go a long way in trying to get the truth, out there, trying to kind of sort through all this crap that's out there. So we really appreciate it. And we appreciate you coming on. I know it's a little bit of a struggle for you today, but we really appreciate you working through it and coming on.
I hope I was you can understand what I was saying.
Absolutely. You did great. Yeah. 100%.
Great as always, Don. And we'll put a link up to your website, buddy. Billy will put one up there so everybody could go check your website out because it's fantastic. And the great work you're doing, Don, to get the truth out there is phenomenal, buddy. And you'll always have a place on our show.
Appreciate the kind words. And I want to say one thing before we end.
Sure.
And that is whenever you see a book that references or uses David Heymann or Clem Heymann as a source, don't believe it.
Don't believe it.
Yeah. Where's the YouTube disclaimer?
Right.
when you see that,
whenever you see a book that uses Robert Schweitzer,
right,
Jeannie Carmen,
yeah,
and many others as a source.
Gianni Russo, don't forget him.
Right.
Gianni Russo, right. Don't believe it.
Exactly.
Because those people don't tell the truth.
Oh, terrible.
Couldn't have said it any better. All right, Don. Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate all the
Thank you, buddy.
Today. And
thank you. I appreciate y'all having me on.
All right. Well, thank
y'all
you.
have a good night.
All right. Good night, Don. Thanks, buddy.
All right. Bye-bye.
That's Enough Out of You podcast is executive produced and written by Bill Rader and Sean Kane and edited by Bill Rader. The That's Enough Out of You podcast and logo are exclusive property of Bags of Chicken, LLC. Any rebroadcast, retransmission, or accounts of this podcast without the express written consent of Bags of Chicken, LLC is prohibited. So don't even try it.